Sorry about the thing. I haven't, the lights behind me. I might have to figure something out. Put one up here. Anyway, welcome back. I have, well, I've not done any recordings that turned out any good since I've been here, but I have been uploading stuff on Friday, which will continue. Friday will be the upload day. Anyway, before I talk about the thing that this video is titled about, I thought I would show these. I went to a local second-hand bookshop and grabbed these. So Desert ANZACs. And the thing that actually made me pick this up was it talked about two things that you never hear about. The Light Car Patrol, which was basically the World War I LRDG, which the Kiwis claim to have invented, but you know. And it says here, the first ever overseas deployment in the Sudan. And so the Sudan thing was like, yeah, got to get this. Very interesting. Australia didn't actually do any fighting in the Sudan. There was like a skirmish, but it was quite small. Anyway, I've read through the first half of this, and it's really good. The Sudan stuff will be its own video, because I would like to, number one, the author does not know much about the Sudan. They say the British were losing, the British weren't. But anyway, that book there, that's going to be 2-3 videos, maybe. And then this one, boy, this one is something I've never heard about. And it's quite rare that, I don't know everything, but it's quite rare that I can walk into a bookshop and be completely blindsided by a piece of World War II history. As in, not just, as in you've never ever heard of this ever in your entire life, and it's completely beyond the realms of imagination. The Mascot. Now the Mascot is about that person right there, who is a 7-year-old Jewish boy who is wearing the uniform of the Latvian SS, who had just killed his mother and sent his father to Auschwitz, where he died, or where the boy thought he died, but he actually survived and died like 30 years after the war, but he never met his father because he just assumed he died. Very sad book. It's written by his son. And yeah, so he had to hide his Jewish identity to be in the SS, and then when the war finished, he was so ashamed that he hid his SS identity and his Jewish identity until he was an old man, and then he basically came forth with it. That's very interesting. I've not thoroughly read through that yet, but oh boy, that's going to be fascinating. Anyway, I'm here to talk about some pictures I took at the museum. So this is the Queensland Museum, basically the ANZAC Gallery. The rest of the museum sucked, to be honest. I've seen animals before. You can see pictures of them. No big deal. I'm not a big natural historian. And the pictures of the actual specimens of Greek vases, well, nice, were very, very possibly the least interesting Greek pottery I've ever seen in my entire life. But anyway. The thing that blew me away most, first, the thing that blew me away most was the friggin' tank. The only World War I tank only World War I German A7V in the world. So obviously that wins everything, which means that it's kind of an OP thing to have in a museum anyway. But the thing that blew me away most, besides the tank, was a cap. I'll put it up on the screen. If you see me, I'm looking at the photos here that I'm going to put in the video. As a cap. This cap was worn in 1915 in combat in Europe. And 1915, 1916. It blew me away. This cap, which was worn in combat, and which was in very, very good condition. The only damage I saw was on the brim. That was worn in combat, in the field. This hat, this cap. And it's now in almost mint condition in a museum somewhere. That blew me away. There's something like I could survive. Maybe it's just because I've not been to many big museums. We don't have many over here in Australia. This is basically this is like the third biggest one in the country. So it's the second was very impressive. It was a German shoulder unit insignia. That was quite. I did not expect to see that. When you talk about going to it's called the ANZAC expedition or something, and so I didn't expect to see World War I German insignia. So somebody's literally just pocketed this and took it home, and it's in brilliant, almost mint condition. As in, I'm blown away by the condition of this stuff, which is why I'll talk about something that wasn't in such good condition later. But I'm absolutely blown away. And sorry about the grainy photos. My camera sucks, and it was all behind glass. And Then I saw something that's very cool. Miniatures. There were actually miniatures on display from the period, from the old lead children's toys. And it said that this was the first real time they've really started including wounded figures in the boxes. So medics, wounded stuff. Not just like a man dead or like someone on the ground shot, like actual proper hospital situations. So that little kids, when they were at home, they were seeing sort of the grim side of war, as it were, which is quite cool. I did not know about that. But yeah, the miniatures are very cool. Obviously not primed because they're chipped, but they're doing quite well for 100. I have miniatures far worse condition than that are much, much younger. Then we move on to the 200-pound shell, I think it was, or 200-pound shell. Next one, I think, is a 6-pounder or something, or an 18-pounder. It's phenomenally huge. That was cool. Again, I've never really seen any massive pieces of artillery. Pieces of shrapnel taken out of... Why did I not take the photo? Okay, there's a photo of the guy that the shrapnel was taken out of. The thing next to it is the bandage that he used to tie up the wound, and he kept these two things for some reason. Sorry, I fidget when I do these videos. So, so that shrapnel was in a person, in an Australian soldier that was taken out. That bandage was then put on him, and then he, for some reason, brought it back and gave it to a museum. That's I don't know, maybe it's just me, but something to be 104 years old? 103, 104 years old. That's phenomenal to me to be able to go and see that. That's just incredible. Next is something I knew existed, but I had one, never seen before, and two, almost had sort of, I looked at it and I'm like, oh, what the, that's a weird canteen. And then I realised what it was, partially because of the thing it's sitting next to, which is a Mills bomb, which is a British grenade. It's a German discus grenade, or like a German, discus grenade is probably the best word for it. It's a grenade that you throw like a discus, or like, fling it through the air. The Olympic discus thing like that, or you could, I don't know, you could frisbee it or something. But it's very, very interesting. Yeah, this German grenade, and there you see it next to some bayonets. Anyway, that was very, very cool. Really enjoyed that, and I think that's good to have in a museum, because I'm going to say there's a little touch of arrogance there where you're like, I'm not going to learn anything in this museum, I'm just here to look at cool stuff. And then you're like, oh, I completely forgot that existed. I've actually learned something here today, which is very, very cool. And that'll teach me to be arrogant going into a museum thinking you know everything. The tour guides were not good. I did not want to go on a tour. The fact that they said, these are guns, and pointed to two of the most iconic rifles in history, and then just moved on. There's those two. Anyway, we'll get to that. C96, one of those guns, possibly one of the most important guns in history. C96 was like one of the first automatics that was comparable to modern weapons. So you had Colt 90 something. Yeah. Anyway, there were things before it. But the C96 was one of the first big automatic pistols, semi-automatic, but the first repeating pistols that was reliable. Came with a cool stock, which you can see next to it, which is the case. I don't have it with me, but I do own one of those, fake gel C96s, and I always thought it was really big, but then I saw it at C96. I'm like, oh, that's huge. You could bludgeon someone to death with that quite easily. And the C96 stocks, they're inspired by the old, like, Colt revolvers had those shoulder stocks. It's not a new thing for the C96. The C96 just used the stock as a holster as well, and that will go on to be used in the Luger, especially the P08. There was an artillery version of the P08 Luger that had like a snail drum, and the stock for firing off, for issuing to artillerymen, that sort of thing. And that was all basically inspired by not really inspired by, but it was basically without the C96, I doubt we would have seen that use of the Luger, which basically freed up rifles for frontline service, and was very important. And was probably a good comfort for the guys who were manning those artillery pieces not to have to lug around rifles all day, especially when the war kicked off and you didn't need them anyway. Then a pom-pom. If you've seen my videos about the Boer War, you've heard, especially the Siege of Eland's River, you will have heard me talk about the pom-pom. Pom-poms were, I believe, 1 or 2 pound, I think, or 1 pound. explosives that were basically they were like a machine gun but an automatic cannon at the same time. They were basically, they were machine guns that fired bombs, explosive shells. Very popular. They were mainly naval use. The Navy was big into their pom-poms. Boers used them, Brits used them in Africa. They were used in World War One. There's quite famous footage of Germans firing pom-poms. I'll see if I can get that, but limited internet here. That's a big issue right now. Limited internet, so I have to actually go to somewhere else to upload this video. So forgive me if I can't actually like rip resources the way I normally would. That is something that I'm looking into. Next, I knew what this was instantly, and I was so thankful that it was here. I never thought in a million years that I would see one of these in real life. It is the Reichsrevolver. The Reichsrevolver is my favorite World War One revolver. Personally, I think it is one of the best revolvers ever made, because it is a giant, hulking monstrosity that just slings big pieces of lead downrange. The Reichsrevolver, if you want to know more about it, go to watch the CN Arsenal on it. It's one of the first ones they did, so it's not quite up with the quality of their 2.5-3 hour Madsen video on one of the most minor machine guns. They spent 2.5-3 hours. That's how good they are. Anyway, the Reichsrevolver was basically a single action. So cock the hammer, rotates the thing, fire, cock the hammer. Whereas the Webley next to it was single and double action. And the reason you have single and double action is basically better aim. So if you're pulling through the thing, it's rotating everything, you're squeezing a little bit too much, or basically you can throw your aim off with the extra tension that you need. And so you throw your aim off with double action. So people liked single action, and some people still do today. I personally would love the option to do both. If I had to have a revolver to fight with, I would probably want the option to do both. But single action is for those long range sort of precision shots. I closed the wrong eye there, I'm not sure why, but anyway, that's for the long range precision shots, or discipline your firing so you're not just like popping off rounds. Anyway, the Reichsrevolver was single action. The Webley was top break, so rounds flew out, 6 in, shot, back to fighting. The Reichsrevolver was gate. So the cylinder, say where it was, you took metal out of a gate, and then you got a stick that came with the gun, or just whatever. Oh, there's a stick on the ground. And then you would just manually turn the cylinder, but if you went too far, you couldn't turn it back. So if you had it click, you'd gone too far and you had to go all the way back around. And you would pump out the 6 and put 6 in by hand, close the gate, and then you were back shooting. It was a piece of junk. It looks cool. It was huge. It was a piece of crud. The Reichsrevolver is very, very cool. I like it. I like the Germanness of it in that period. I think it was like 1873, 1876, might be 1876. So it was in the cowboy revolver era, but it was completely obsolete. Black powder weapon, obviously, because pre-1886 was when smokeless powder came out. So the Reichsrevolver, I was very happy to see one. I wouldn't be very happy to be issued one, but it was very, very cool to see that piece of history there. Something that especially as I was watching CN Arsenal from the very beginning, and it was like one of the first pistols they ever did. So it was very, very cool to be able to see that in the flesh. Anyway, next, the SMLE and the Gewehr. So this is the SMLE doesn't need any introduction. Mark III Star. This is the British World War I rifle. It was also the British World War II rifle for the start. If you see any BEF, especially BEF miniatures and Australians in the Pacific, you almost always see them with the snub nose, is how you tell the snub nose on miniatures anyway. And underneath that, you've got your Mauser, the thing that inspired most of the rifles in the world. Boers love their Mausers. The Americans copied it with Springfield. Basically, the Dutch copied it, the Belgians copied it, the Austrians wish they could have copied it, but they got their piece of junk Kropatscheks and this, or not the Kropatscheks, they're what were they called? The straight pull things that they got, the junk. Mauser was basically the Mauser was the Model T Ford of rifles. It was basically, well, I shouldn't say Mauser was like the Windows of rifles. You just took it and you mixed it up a little bit and you made it into your own thing, and you could add all this stuff to it, but it was the universal rifle basically. And British went in opposite direction, or not an opposite, but a different direction. They went for 10 rounds instead of 5. They went for an exposed magazine instead of a bottom magazine. They went for cock on close rather than cock on open. That's still a huge debate, by the way. I'm not going to weigh in on that, but I do have a position on that. They went for all sorts of different things. Protected front side, rear bridge that was quite secure. They both used stripper clips, which come out by... Anyway, I'm not going to get into the differences between those two, but it's very cool. The Mauser was very rusted, very pitted, they could definitely use some bluing. I'm not sure why they haven't looked at it, because that Mauser needs to be completely restored. This is something that Mark Novak, the guy here from Anvil, who is the gunsmith at Sea and Arsenal, he talks about this of conservation of firearms, because if you just let that rust into dust, then you've destroyed a firearm. You haven't like, oh, I don't want to destroy the value or destroy the authenticity of it by taking this rust and converting it into ferrous oxide into ferroferric oxide, or ferric oxide into ferroferric oxide. Basically, you're turning the rust into blued metal, the same they would have had in the factory. But anyway, you do the quick procedure. Oh, the gun's been worked on. It's no longer authentic, but it exists. It hasn't rusted away. It's still safe to use. Anyway, not properly looking after historical antiques bugs me. So that definitely should be fixed. There are plenty of Mausers in the world. It's not like this is the A7V, but it would be nice to see that will fix up a little bit. Second one. The next thing is a German flag from World War One. Again, to me, it's about the age. The age of these things blows me away. It's like, oh, it's a German flag from World War One. It's 100 and something years old. It was captured in like 1914. This is taken in Bidipika, which is in New Guinea. I think it was taken in New Guinea somewhere. Australia was the first Commonwealth nation to fire a shot, because as soon as war was declared, there was a German ship coming out of one of the harbours. I think it was in Perth, which is in Western Australia, which is essentially a separate country, but it's not really, but it basically might as well be. And the ship was leaving, and they fired a shot across the bow and basically turned it around. It wasn't a warship, it was like a transport ship, but Australians fired the first shot of the war. And in 1914, the first actions of the Australians was not Gallipoli, which happened in 1915. It was Bidipika, where less than 200 Australians took the German radio station at Bidipika, which is in New Guinea, and basically took it and captured it. And this flag was taken at that capture. Some people did die. There was some fighting. Most of the Germans were natives pressed into service. There were Germans there, and most people don't know about Bidipika. It needs its own video, but I have not the knowledge in my head to do it now. The next thing really, really impressed me. It is the German control wheel, like the speed up, slow down wheel from the Emden, which if you don't know, the Emden was this very famous German ship which the Australians yeeted to the bottom of the ocean. The Australian Navy sunk the Emden. I can't remember which ship it was, but it was probably HMS something named after a capital city, because that's what we like to do. But the Emden was sunk, and they've salvaged this. There was also coins from Mexico, some pesos, and various sailor effects. So yes, the Emden relics are right there, which is very cool, because that's something again that a lot of Australians probably don't know about. The Emden was quite a big achievement for the Australian Navy, and it was very cool. This next thing was quite cool to see. I had underestimated the size of these things. This is a Granatwerfer, like German trench mortar thing. The first photo I took was really bad as I'm looking at it now, but the second photo sort of makes it up. You can sort of see my reflection in there. It's a big hulking piece of, what did Lindy Page say? It's they lob socking great bits of ironmongery. This thing is a trench mortar essentially, and wow, they really condensed those mortars down from 1918 to 1938 or 39. 20 years, man. They did wonders for the mortar. That thing is a monstrosity. And in the background, you can see, I don't know why it's got the word trophy written there, but there is that's something I should say. There was a Vickers gun in the I think you can actually see it, at the bottom there, a Lewis gun. What are you doing, museum? The Lewis gun was, the Vickers was cut away on one side, right? So you could see the internal mechanisms. See, I first looked at it, I'm like, why is that broken? Oh no, it's cut away. But it's facing the wrong way. If you look at the photo, you can see the Vickers, but they've got the outside showing, but you can't see the cutaway. That should have been in like a thing in the middle where you could see one side and see the other. Especially the Maxim guns are so interesting on the inside, the way that charging handle works with a double block. Anyway, it would have been cool to see. But they've got a Maxim gun up here, which is essentially basically just a Vickers, because Vickers and Maxim, they're all Maxims essentially. Even the Russians are all Maxims, which all the Russians call. Anyway, Hiram Maxim made the Maxim gun, and then he sold the formula to basically everyone in Europe, and the French were pretty much the only power going into World War One without them. The French had those stupid those stripper clip fed machine guns. Didn't work out too good. And underneath it is a Panzer. What they call? What's that called? Sorry. You can see in this video here, I've actually put my fist up for my fist is smaller than the breech of this weapon. Anyway, Tankgewehr, Panzergewehr, Tankgewehr. I also heard them called Tankgewehrs, but I thought Panzergewehr would be better. Maybe the Germans didn't come up with the word. Anyway, these things were basically a Mauser, but you multiply everything by 3. Tankgewehr. They dislocate people's shoulders. They were utter misery to use in combat. It is literally just a Mauser scaled up. From what I can tell, they worked. Good luck firing one of those things. Good luck carrying it around. Yeah, that probably really sucked. But yeah. Then we get to the medals. Oh, sorry, not medals. The badges. And one of them I thought was really cool. These badges were recovered by somebody who was killed in 1916. Because at first I looked at this, I'm like, oh, there's a cool collection of World War I and II badges. And then I read, no, he was killed in 1916, and this is his personal collection. That he basically, I don't want to say stolen, but had got while he was in Europe. And one of the ones that was really interesting was this one, because I would see this and immediately associate that with a certain brutal, murderous dictatorship / ideological movement. But apparently this was just a symbol used by a British regiment at one point. I would love to track down which one. Unfortunately, again, internet situation is a little limited here. But if anyone knows what that symbol is of, I would love to know, because that's this. Every time you see that in history, that's generally associated with the Soviet Union or some kind of communist faction. But that would be quite cool to see. It would not be the first time a symbol has been appropriated by somebody for nefarious purposes. Okay. One thing I'll throw in here before I get to the main event is it bad research on the part of the museum, or just someone who doesn't know what they're doing? Yeah, this is a problem when you just have a historian, right? Because people don't know all of history. If you gave me something from the English Civil War, I would look at you. I'm completely lost. I have no idea what the heck you're talking about. The period between 1600 and 1700, so basically the period of 200 years in mid 15s, mid 17s, maybe early 1700s. Nothing. So I would not, I would hand that to somebody else. But for some reason, these guys, I don't know what they've done. They've got an they've got these awesome spear tips, by the way, which are really cool. These are Roman and bronze finds. Very cool. Bronze Age spear tips, very cool. I never thought I'd see one of those in a museum. You can see what I mean by the pottery. It was a little lackluster. It's just basic pottery. But this spear tip was apparently taken from the Battle of Varus in the 9th century in Teutoburg Forest. I've never heard of any of those things. I've never heard of the Battle of Varus. I've heard of the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, where Varus led legions to their death. Was it 2 or 3? I think it was 2 or 3. And the emperor was screaming, "Varus, give me back my legions." He basically had these legions slaughtered in Germany in the Teutoburg Forest, which is why, by the way, in 1914, when the Germans won that massive victory against the Russian Empire, they named it the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, or the Battle of Teutoburg, yeah. Not because it happened in the area, it happened sort of close by, but they wanted to reclaim that not from the Romans, from the Teutonic Knights, anyway. But the Teutoburg Forest, there's basically 3 battles called Teutoburg, anyway. So this is the Roman one. I'm not sure of any battle that happened in the 9th century. I'm going to do a whole video on the stupid BCE and CE thing. It's the dumbest thing that has ever come out of some academic. Anyway, so yes, not sure what any of those mean. I would have said second, was it first or second century, whatever it was. Again, I'm not a massive Roman guy. My Roman stuff is normally Caesarian Roman stuff, not imperial. So yes, first or second, leaning towards first century AD, not CE. That's not a religious thing, by the way. That's a stop changing the language thing. Anyway, so anyway, I would say first century AD, maybe second century AD. Teutoburg Forest, Battle of Teutoburg Forest, or ambush in the Teutoburg Forest. Where was it? It would have been Legate or whatever. Again, I'm not an Imperial Roman person, but anyway, General Varus got these legions slaughtered, and himself. He didn't. He was killed too. But I thought, you're a museum. You're supposed to be very responsible, unless I'm way off the mark and there's some battle that I've never heard of. I'm not sure. First of all, there were no Romans in the 9th century, so I'm pretty sure they're wrong. Byzantines aren't Romans, by the way. Whoever says they are is wrong. Byzantines are Byzantines. That's why we call them Byzantines. They're like the Romans, but if I can quote Fulton Sheen, because something is like something means that it is not that thing. So if you say, well, the Byzantines are like the Romans, they do this, and this, and this, but they're not the Romans. They could be 99% like the Romans, but that 1% is what makes them not Romans. The last Roman we know is Belisarius. He's given that name, and I'm happy to accept him as the last Roman. The last Roman emperor was that old man anyway, whatever. When Rome was sacked, the Roman emperor's stuff was given back to the Western Roman Emperor, so the Eastern Roman Emperor. That's it. That's when Rome stops. Yeah, so there were no Romans in the 9th century. Fight me, I suppose, is the only response I can give you to that. If you want to argue that point, they're Byzantines, not Romans. The Teutoburg Forest battle happened in the 1st or 2nd century, and I have no idea what the Battle of Varus is. Varus was a commander, not a place. On to the reason I went to this museum in the first place. But I'm gonna hold you out here with a picture, very cool picture. The thing that intrigued me about this picture was not the dove, sorry, not the pigeon, the homing pigeon, which should have been a messenger pigeon. It's the Hotchkiss machine gun mounted in the sponson. That's quite cool. You don't often see Hotchkiss. You don't often see quite good pictures of Hotchkiss machine guns mounted on the sponsons of Mark 4s or Mark 5s. Very cool to see. But here we go on to Mephisto. Now, Mephisto is the only surviving A7V, which was the German tank of World War I. They made 11. So, yeah, it's extremely rare. It's the only one of its kind, and it's Australians. I don't think Australians knocked it out. I think Australians are the ones who claimed it. Literally dragged it off the battlefield and stole it, and then put it out the front of a post office in the middle of the bush somewhere. And then the Queensland government realised that, oh, well, we should probably hang on to this. And now it is in the Brisbane Museum because it was a Queensland regiment that took it. Again, I'm not sure they knocked it out, but finders keepers, and if you found it first, we'll steal it off you and keep it anyway. Because Australia. It has a boatload of machine guns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minimum. There were more. There were 6. What am I saying? There were 6 machine guns. A massive gun at the front. You can see the image. Why didn't I get a good picture of the image? Is a devil, like a demon, Mephiston, the demon, stealing a Mark IV British tank, which is quite funny. That's the original German insignia. It's got a big German iron cross on the front of it. That's not a Nazi thing. That's a German thing. The name Mephisto, this is basically exactly how it looked at the start. It's got a piece of battle damage, which I didn't know about, which is very cool. Part of the roof seems to be missing. I'm not sure why they did that, because you can't see inside of it anyway, but whatever, it's cool. It didn't look like it was, it looked like it was just removed for ease of access, not for actual being destroyed or anything. The doors are open, you cannot get in. I did touch it. There is like walls around it, but I reached in and touched it. I have touched the oldest German tank in the world. I can say that now. It's got a little bit of battle damage, which is cool. I'm glad they didn't fix that. I do like that being there. The only tank that, Tiger 131 has got some battle damage. It's been repaired. That's cool. But for Mephiston, for tanks like that, I'm a big fan of leaving the battle damage on them. If you're not going to make this tank run again, which you should never make Mephiston run again. Mephisto should be a memento. It should be maintained. It should not be driven around. Bovington have, I think it's the last Mark IV one of the last fully operating Mark IVs, and they're basically never going to drive it again, because every time they drive it, they break a pin that you have to, eventually you'll wear out all the parts and you'll have a repro tank. And I think that Mephisto should just sit as a frozen in time piece of history forever. And so I'm glad that they've left the battle damage on there. I think if you started messing with it too much, you would lose the tank, and just make some replica A7Vs. I've always heard that there were 18 people in an A7V. This picture shows 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So each machine gun would have a firer and a loader. So that's 6 machine guns, that's 12. Driver commander, 13, 14. Front gun would have another 2, 15, 16. You'll probably have someone changing the gears, the British had someone changing the gears. I'm not sure if the Germans did. And then a mechanic. So there's your 18. These things were crammed full of people. But you could always take out some of the machine guns. I don't want to say quite often, because these things there were 11 of them. So maybe you're only operating 2 machine guns, or maybe you're not operating the rear guns, you're just operating the side guns, so you've got 4 less people in the tank, and things like that. But yes, that is my trip to the museum. I very much enjoyed it. If you're ever in Queensland, in Brisbane, I don't want to say Queensland, because if you're in Queensland, you should go to the Cairns Museum, which have not been to, do want to go to this year. But that's phenomenal. That's the Australian Arms and Artillery Museum. But if you're ever in Brisbane, I would definitely check out the ANZAC exhibit. There was a whole bunch of other stuff that was there that I didn't manage to get photos of. Lots of letters from home. They actually had the examples of the telegrams that you would be sent, that they would hand to the poor local minister or priest or rabbi or whatever. And he would basically, when the person would walk down the street, people would just flee in terror from them, because they thought they were coming to hand them these awful letters. So they have examples of those letters. They have examples of letters just people wrote home. They have a lot of stuff on nurses, which I didn't really get photos of because it's not something I know an awful lot about. But they had a lot of stuff in there, and I would definitely recommend checking it out. Thanks very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.